If you're sitting at your desk wondering whether you should drop a few $100 on a pre-built gaming rig, you're probably looking for something that just works, won't surprise you with hidden quirks, and feels like a solid investment rather than a flashy billboard of specs. The biggest fear is ending up with a machine that screams on paper, but turns out to be a pain to set up, noisy, or just short-lived when you finally need that extra frame in a demanding title. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent the last couple of weeks running the Skytech Shadow gaming PC through a typical weekend of gaming, a couple of work-from-home days, and even a quick video editing test to see how the system behaves when you push it outside of pure gaming. What I found is that the machine mostly lives up to the promises that come with a Ryzen 7 7800X3D and an RTX 5060 Ti, but there are a few trade-offs you should know before you click Add to Cart. First off, who is this PC really for? If you're a gamer who wants to hit 144 Hz or higher in titles like Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, or the newest Call of Duty without constantly tweaking settings, the combination of the 7800X 3D and a 16GB GDDR7 card gives you that extra cushion. The extra 3DV cache on the Ryzen chip shines in CPU-bound games, meaning you'll see smoother performance in dense scenes and less stutter when you're hopping between a crowded lobby and a boss fight. The 32GB DDR5 at 6000 MHz also means you can have multiple apps open: Discord, Chrome tabs, OBS without the system feeling cramped. So, for anyone who streams their gameplay, or wants a workstation that can handle both gaming and light content creation, this is a strong candidate. On the flip side, if you're a budget-conscious builder who prefers to handpick each component, you might feel the price tag is a bit high for a pre-built. The RTX 5060 Ti, while a solid mid-range card, sits a generation behind the RTX 4070 series, and you'll notice that the very latest ray-trace titles may need a slight dip in settings to maintain smooth frame rates. If you're chasing ultra-ray tracing at 4K, you'll probably want a more premium GPU. Also, the 650W gold-rated PSU is adequate for this configuration, but it doesn't leave much headroom if you ever decide to upgrade to a more power-hungry GPU later on. Now let's talk about the day-to-day experience. The Skytech Shadow comes in a sleek, dark chassis with a 360mm ARGB AIO cooler that looks great when the lights are on. In practice, the cooler does its job. The CPU temps sit comfortably in the low 60 SC under load, even after a marathon of 2-hour matches. That matters because you won't hear a frantic fan spin up while you're trying to focus on a sniper's line of sight. The noise level stays in the background, which is a pleasant surprise given the high-performance cooling solution. If you're sensitive to sound while working from home or streaming late at night, you'll appreciate that the system stays relatively quiet. One hidden trade-off is the size of the case. It's a mid-tower, but the AIO radiator takes up a good chunk of interior space, leaving a tighter fit for additional drives or larger aftermarket coolers. If you were hoping to add a second SSD or a big HDD for a massive game library, you'll need to be strategic with cable management and possibly sacrifice a few expansion slots. For most users who rely on the 1TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD for games and work files, this isn't a deal-breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you plan to store everything locally. The Wi-Fi 8 2.11 AC module works reliably out of the box. I tested it with a 150 megabits per second internet plan and saw stable ping rates in the mid-20s while gaming, and the speed didn't dip when streaming on Twitch. The system also ships with Windows 11, but there's no bloatware cluttering the start menu, just the essentials, which is a pleasant change from some other pre-builts that preload trial software. The clean Windows install saved me a few minutes of cleanup before I could actually start playing. From a value perspective, the real saving comes from the integration of the high-end CPU and a decent GPU in a single package. Buying those parts separately would cost you well over $2,000 when you factor in the cost of a motherboard, power supply, and cooling solution. Skytech bundles them with the AIO and a 1TB Gen 4 SSD for a price that feels competitive for a system ready to run current titles at high settings. If you factor in the time you'd otherwise spend researching component compatibility and assembling the rig, the convenience factor adds intangible value. Practical weaknesses are few, but worth noting. The front I/O panel is modest 2 USB-A ports, a headphone jack, and the power button, so if you need a bunch of peripherals, you'll reach for the rear ports. The rear provides a decent selection, including USB-C, but the layout isn't as ergonomic as you might find on a